Hey guys, happy Friday. Oh my gosh, what a red day. I mean, I really think you just got to have enough cash on you because there are some real opportunities in this market that I think are just being completely ignored. Past performance is not indicative of future returns. We always say, since I'm going to probably talk a lot about different things in this particular call because this entire screen is red. I mean, you got barely anything. And then the things that are green got no business being green. Like I love the CEO from Domino's Pizza. I think he's amazing, but I think he's got a really tough environment. His main ingredient is wheat, for God's sakes. Goodness sakes, watch my language. You know what I'm saying? And then First National Information Services, that it does a particular activity in the marketplace that is not going to necessarily show significant growth, but maybe they're thinking data side. I mean, this is a stable kind of earner as far as that goes. And then Sherwin-Williams, I'm seeing that one of my old relationships, Richard Chilton, is very long, this name. And he's a smart man. That said, their major input is oil, and maybe they're just benefiting from the lower oil price here. I'm not sure, but you do have a weird housing environment to have Sherwin-Williams up 70 basis points. And then, I mean, there's just so few. That's a good read. I don't really have anything negative to say about that, but it's a very strange market. And you can kind of see just every single thing red, which tells you it is a generalized sell-off. When we look at the major market indices, you've got S&P down 2%, Nasdaq down 2%. The Russell, which actually has been my go-to short of recent because you do have a very particular composition in the Russell and a particular way that they historically have done better, which is through M&A activity. That's just not going to happen. But crude oil under 80, I mean, if this isn't an opportunity for people to get their oil pricing and stabilize, I don't know what is. But even then, this has got to stay down there for a long time for it to really hurt any of the energy companies. And in fact, this is still well above the cost of capital for pretty much everything in oil and gas. So this is just nonsensical when you have deal after deal being struck to try to get LNG across the pond over to Europe, who desperately needs it. That's just silly nonsense on a day with people still processing the Fed. I'm pretty sure Monday you're going to come in with some analysts all over the map. Some will try to keep slamming down on this market, but others will just admit that these valuations make absolutely no sense. Next week's economic data is not as harsh. I would say that there's a couple of data points that I think the market will try to figure out how to read. You got GDP coming in on Wednesday, and then you've got the PCE indicators. What I'm going to go through today is really FedEx, and I want to just review Costco. Both of them had their conference call last night. Next week, we have Cintas, which does uniforms and various office supplies. They'll have something interesting to say as relates to the state of business affairs. Paychecks will come in. They'll tell us probably the hiring. They'll tell us a set of things as relates to what they're seeing on payroll, and it'll either reaffirm or not the jobless claim numbers that also come out on Thursday. And then we've got Rite Aid, which isn't in the S&P 500, but does sometimes impact CVS and Walgreens in my space, and CarMax. That's next week that I'm seeing thus far. There may be some additional ones that I'm going to add in there later next week. I want to talk about Costco because this really indicated to me that this quarter is going to be a bit of a mixed bag, because we had a few different companies report a certain way. And then Costco, oddly enough, had a fantastic quarter. Revenue up 15, operating and net income up 10. I don't know what this Asia to Europe. I think that's a typo on my part. Operating income up 10%. And you can kind of see how things are going on. This is the same store sales year over year. Unbelievable growth, which is great, even in their e-commerce, but you can see people are still preferencing going into Costco. You got to get those samples, right? And some of my married friends tell me this is the only date they get every week with their significant other. So, that kind of is what it is. But Costco really is telling you the consumer is hanging in there, despite what others might be saying out there. I'm going to meet you, David. I got a little bit of feedback coming over. So that was a very telling and positive sign. But Costco has been doing fantastic as people have been preferring to buy in bulk, and also they do sell a lot of food and a lot of those basic goods that people are concerned about in this kind of environment. So they're doing just fine. They, as well as Walmart, both benefit from offering affordable fuel to people to get that store traffic in. So realize that's the case. But what we really want to highlight is FedEx, and the degree to which FedEx, which started us all Ooh, got a plane coming overhead. Uh, FedEx, which started us last week into the downward spiral. I wanted to review what they actually had to say on their call because, when they came and pre-announced and justified it to us as a number of things, they were talking about the fact that the slowdown was abrupt and aggressive, and that's why they came out a week before earnings. I mean, it happens. I will say that, but when I look at this, it could have been addressed on the call. It's a little bit awkward all around. Let's talk about it. This is what they actually came in. You had revenue up 5%, operating income down 14%, EPS down 20%. I'm highlighting the fuel piece, which now should be getting a little better with what's going on. But it really, I mean, fuel was not up 80%. Well, I mean, you got August. This is a little strange is all I'm saying, given that we've got fuel prices coming down, not going up. So they must have really, really didn't talk about fuel hedging at all in this call, which I thought was strange. People were really more worried about the core business. But to me, given that this was 822 million, this should have been discussed. It was not. Maintenance repairs was up a little bit. That's not really a big deal. But this was where they really lost it. And then they said there were, you can go on down the line and you can see that the big issue for them was really that they came and pre-announced was really the slowdown and the fact that they wanted to let you know very clearly that they were shutting down planes and parking them and the such. Now I want to show you, it's so weird. Sometimes I wish, it's nice to listen to what the analysts are asking, but sometimes I'm like, these are not the questions I would ask. I do want to show you that, I don't know why I did that. Okay. This is really the segment that was a problem. The FedEx Express, it went from 567 in operating income to 174. Okay. But strangely enough, FedEx Freight did just fine. And that is really telling you that you're going to have a very particular mix of intriguing stuff going on here. See, FedEx Express is, in particular, the way that they said it on the call, it tells me that trade between us and the Atlantic is really what slowed down. Now, they wanted to say it was also Asia, but I really think it was Europe, and it might have been Asia a bit. And the reason I think that, they didn't really give great geographic breakout, which kind of bothers me because historically, they used to give a ton of data. But this FedEx Express segment versus FedEx Freight, which was the glaring awesomeness, really tells you that they swapped out the speed at which they needed the things that they needed. Now, we knew certain things were driving the Express segment, and we've also heard from a number of the retailers that they were inventory rich just this minute, so to speak. And you could do store checks and see, you just ask the managers whether or not they got enough labor to actually unload what's happening coming to the stores. And you'll know that there is inventory mismatch across a bunch of retailers. But the freight segment switch just slows down the timing of arrival. This may potentially not impact UPS quite as much. We shall see. The other thing too is we can see the volume numbers that came out. If you look very carefully, these are FedEx Express US domestic package volume slowed down aggressively, but international slowed down even more. You can kind of see that also aggressively. FedEx Ground actually was more or less okay. I mean, it's a little bit, it's more or less in line with the previous quarter, and Ground Commercial is also not falling off a cliff, so to speak. Economy is a little bit, but and then this is FedEx Express volumes. And if you just kind of do the math from these three charts and derive it over here, you can kind of see that it's really these two pieces that are causing the drop off. So that's really international. And then freight is more or less flat. US versus international, you can see the drop off from 21 to 17 versus just 1,000 for the US. The severity of the drop off is much more acute on the international business. Now they have the European business because they purchased that business, a series of businesses in the last couple of years. But additionally, The other thing to note is that they have a shipping business that is impacted a lot. So when they're talking about Asia, it's really stuff that's coming on boat specifically. With Europe, it's a mixture of boat and air that we're talking about. And then what's going on domestic, they don't really have quite as much domestically as, like, say, even UPS has more exposure to Europe in that regard. Okay, FedEx pricing. They were getting pricing. You can kind of see pricing is not your issue. You can see that FedEx Express International has only come down a little bit with the euro, and so on and so forth. So it's not a pricing issue. It really is a volume issue. And they suggested that the volumes, particularly in Europe and Asia, dropped off very aggressively. And, you know, it's hard to then carry that through to the other shippers. Because, for example, the trucking folk, they're not really impacted by what's going on international. Your rails, additionally, not impacted. If anything, the mix of what the rails are carrying is very different. Rails primarily carry things like energy, industrial equipment, you know, fertilizer, that sort of thing. But very, very fascinating, not necessarily positive, but we absolutely will need another data point to figure out what exactly to make of this FedEx quarter. For those that want to just say, oh, it's negative for the United States, I have said for some time, I definitely think the rest of the world is going to fall off a cliff as far as their economies go. But the United States is a different animal because we are very strategically so a nation that has great raw materials and strategic geography that is just preferential. I can't tell from this FedEx readout exactly how to make like think about the impact to the United States logistics business. Overall, definitely less constructive for sure. Like, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this looks like Europe is doing exactly what I thought, which is falling out of bed. I don't believe that the US is falling out of bed, but definitely it's a weaker economy. And with that, I'll pause. Hopefully that makes sense what I'm saying. I think it's going to be mixed. I mean, you look at Costco, that was a good quarter. That was crystal clean. There was nothing wrong with it. And, you know, there's more than one company that's come out just perfect. You know, it's like you know, perfect landing, as, you know, if you're watching gymnastics, you know what I'm saying? They stuck the landing. But, like, you know, internationally, it's a hot mess.
They stuck.
I don't know the way to say it. You know, like Procter and
Wow,
Gamble.
that's awesome. It's a great way to say it.
Yeah, because like Procter, what was it, came out the other day? Who did I just do that? You know, you think about, like, this is very much so the leadership of a company is going to make a big difference this coming quarter. You think about who is it that I literally just presented on the other day? Was it Procter and Gamble? I think it was Procter and Gamble.
Maybe
Anyway,
Sherwin-Williams.
no, it was just the other day, the consumer company that I anyways, take a look two episodes back. You know, they came in and they just basically were getting out of they're getting out of the Europe business. You know what I'm saying? They don't know what wheat is going to cost in Europe. Whoever makes the cereal, I don't know why I'm fading on it today. It's been a long morning with my parents here, but I think it was Procter & Gamble. Anyways, you know, Europe is the problem. I don't know another way to say it. But it may not be the United States.
It really is.
That's what it looks like to me, is that Europe is your biggest problem. The US might be slowing down a touch, but nothing that a good executive can't manage on operations and gross margins. But Europe's the hot mess. And if you got a lot of exposure to it and you didn't think it was going to slow to a grinding halt, that's where you strategically made a little bit of an error. That's what it looks like to me.
Let me run something by you on macro.
Yeah.
It seems like inflation now is
General
old.
Mills. I just remember it was General Mills. I was thinking, I was
Okay,
talking about the other day. General Mills.
It seems like inflation may be old news. I mean, they've raised rates, what, 4% this year? And I think it's a problem now, or his issue now is employment. And the baby boomers are not coming back to work.
No.
So we may be, I don't know. It seems like our new, we might have reached a new normal for unemployment rate. And that's not a bad thing.
Well, you remember unemployment doesn't include people that have permanently left the workforce. So
Yeah, it's kind of a weird number anyway,
it's a
right?
weird number.
Right.
Exactly correct. We have a labor shortage. That labor shortage is not coming from people not wanting to work. I wish people would stop saying stuff like that. I find it insulting to certain people. Do you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right.
It's
Right.
really coming from, I mean, I don't mean you, I meant like in general. I felt like, no, the talking heads that, so to speak, people are unable to find jobs because their skills do not match the jobs that are posted. And employers are having to be more flexible and become better at training their staff. Now, we went away from that for a period of time, probably last 2 decades, if we're really honest. When I started in the business, it was assumed that I would get a certain level of training through work. Now, I think, it's all over the map. Some companies are definitely investigating that and more aggressive about it. But this was, you know, this is just something that needs to be resolved, as far as it goes. And it's going to take time. And a lot of that has to do with the speed at which technology moved and the skills that were associated with it. Okay. So I agree with you. Until we can get until we can get America skilled up to what is currently needed versus what no longer needed, that's a thing. Um, you know, you're right. You can't, rates aren't going to change.
Maybe the
Smarter.
solution
Another
is
way to say it.
you
Rates can't
train
make you
you.
or anyone else smarter.
Maybe the solution is you train them on site.
Yeah. I mean, and part of it also is, what does it mean to train someone on site? In the blue collar businesses, they have a long history of how precisely they train people on site. It's just that they've
Right.
had the labor sucked out of them for so long, that it's just not a very fair circumstance to expect them to somehow magically have this brilliant staff that comes in. In the white collar areas, technology doesn't care about inflation or global economy. It just keeps marching forward, and companies are trying everything they can to get staff to do whatever it is. That I have to think through, because after listening to Salesforce call, I had some kind of hypotheses of what's actually going on. A company like Salesforce, interestingly enough, it doesn't depend just like sales, labor shortage, 100% just for the internal stuff. They do have a fair number of consultants that make money selling Salesforce that are not internal. And so you almost think of that as externalized salespeople in some ways. They look like consultants to the rest of the world, but essentially, if they're implementing a Salesforce piece of software, then they are just, 1099 Salesforce salesmen. Let's call it what it is. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm not sure how to think about that in the technology front, and what creativity is going to happen to resolve some of those issues.
I think so. I think it's a better way to train them.
Yeah, it is. It does require, it has a different cosmetic look to it.
Right.
We do know that the consulting firms have been doing just fine during this period of craziness. Because it's not it's not a tire. Do you know what I mean? If you're going to put in an enterprise piece of software system, it's not like we just buy it and it magically integrates with everything we're doing. So there is some like specialized knowledge, that sort of thing. um,
Okay, cool. According to our Elliott Wave, we've been bearish for a while now.
I know. I told you the other day you were so upset because it rallied. I was like, I'm not convinced this will hold. I wish I had just went ahead and pounded in, but I got really scared to be too aggressively short. I should have just really nailed it aggressively because I kind of knew. I would say the following though: the way that this is laying out, there are a lot of things that are way too cheap relative,
Exactly. Yeah.
way too cheap. So I'm not sure. I don't feel as passionately that this will hold through Monday. And I'll tell you, the one thing that really bothers me is, or it doesn't bother me, but is exciting to me, is that from a long-term personal holdings perspective, not my trading account, there were a number of names that have great dividend yields that I'm just gonna have to preview more aggressively in the days to come, because you can't get dividend yield like this from a company that, for example, Devon, which we've previewed more than once, it now is trading at a 10% dividend yield. You should get that if if what you'd like to do is just have passive income, because that's gonna be fine for a little bit. IEP came back in towards the 50 level. It always dances around 50. But Iron Mountain, which got pummeled last week because they came out on their investor day and really were just talking about their strategy. And then you had article after article, I'm not even sure why, that were so negative. I didn't see anything negative in that quarter. What they told me is that's exactly what I feel like they ought to be doing as a business, which is using the fact that they have the largest global footprint on file storage, and that they've
Mhm.
grown this data business like crazy to continue to use that, transfer that warehousing space into service centers, since that warehousing space is on the books below book value now. As soon as you turn it into a data center, the book value is significantly higher than just some empty warehouse. And then just selling. You know what I'm saying? People just, sell transfer services into digital, sell global digital footprint because you've got physical space all over the globe. There's only one other REIT that even remotely looks like they could do that job, so that it's not like a hugely competitive market. And yet this thing's got a 5% dividend yield and the market keeps wanting to sell it. I keep nibbling a little bit here and there because I want to see how high this dividend will go before this becomes stupid, but there's no risk to being able to pay it at all. So Iron Mountain is now massively on my radar screen for a slow accumulate for the long term. Because I'll tell
What
you
is the
this,
yield? What's the yield?
it's closing in on 5%. The ticker's IRM.
Okay.
Yeah, closing in at 5%. I mean, you're really literally buying data center real estate below book value. I'm
Gotcha.
actually interested right now. I think it's right on top. Let me see what the book value is, because if you look at earnings, it may look a little expensive on PE. Yeah, it's a little bit. I mean, if you understand that the book value is overstated, then it doesn't look quite as ugly. They will continue to pay down debt. Enterprise value to EBITDA is 15 times, but I think they're growing something like 10 or 12 without any kind of problem. Good cash flow, et cetera. But I'll do something more comprehensive in the days to come. I don't know that in this kind of market you pound into anything, but if I like a good dividend yield for the long term. So 5%.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
pay you to own it. Carl Icahn was
Yeah.
at the conference I was at in New York.
Oh, what did he have to say?
I asked him, I said, how do you pay 16% on IEP? And he said they do have the cash flow.
Yeah, they do.
Obviously.
They
Okay.
100% do. Yeah. I think most of the
Okay.
cash flow is coming from that refiner. As long as that
Right.
refiner
Right.
is there, they're just going to do nothing but print money. And then he turned around the refiner,
He said he bought the refiner really cheaply.
really cheap, because the
Okay.
refiners went through this period of nonsense when
Right.
fracking first came on. It changed the whole dynamic of things. The refiners were even in 2008 hugely burdened with debt, and so all of them had to be reorged pretty significantly. My suspicion is that's when he got in there, was when they were doing the reorg, which meant he would have bought it cents on the dollar. So I don't think
Yeah.
he has.
Yeah. He did talk about that exact
Yeah.
thing.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad I'm staying up on my stories correctly. Yeah, that's not going to be any kind of problem for debt holders or for equity holders. Yeah. Wow. What's he like? Is he got a? I've never met him, even though we're probably neighbors in New York. As far as that goes.
Oh,
That's awesome.
he's
He's got-
really laid back, real calm.
I would think so. He's just accomplished so much in this lifetime. I mean, when you have a whole,
Doesn't seem like anybody that would panic ever.
I mean, you had a whole mess of, there was a documentary on him and it was like, well, he bought like TWA or something. I think one of the airlines, maybe it was Pan Am. I can't remember which one, but they all,
TW.
was it TWA? Yep. They all came knocking on his door because of the labor disputes. And I think if you've had that many stewardess and airline pilots in front of your house with your kids and on the other side of a fence, I feel like something like this isn't going to bother you much. I'm a fan though. I am a fan. That's really cool. It sounds like
Okay.
a conference. All right. We'll get back to it. Take care, everybody. Happy weekend.